Okay, what if I told you there was this ancient practice, something that's been around for thousands of years, but could completely transform the way that you live today? And it takes about 15 seconds to do, and it'll just bring you a sense of clarity and meaning to your life. Because the problem is, we live such distracted lives and we just waste so much time and attention on trivial stuff, and none of it really matters. And this simple practice can break you free from all that. Hey, welcome to A Little Nudge. My name is Derek, and for the last 3 decades, I've been helping people explore and grow their faith. And in these videos, I'm just giving you a few nudges, a few tools to help you live a deeper and a more meaningful life. So my life changed when I got some really bad news from the doctor. He utters those words that just sent a shiver down my spine. I knew something was coming, but it was still really hard to hold it all together. And he said to me that I was going to have to start wearing these hearing aids. He was like, your hearing's got so bad, you're going to have to wear hearing aids. And I got home to see my wife, and she was like, oh, that's really good. You get hearing aids, you'll be able to hear again. And she was looking at me, and I just had this like face of devastation, because I was like 50 and wearing hearing aids. It means like I'm getting older. It means I'm got a disability. It means I'd be really conscious of it. It was a reminder that actually I'm heading towards death. And even though it was terrifying in the moment, it was actually a great thing to happen to me. There's a verse in Psalm 90, verse 12, that says this. It says, teach us to realize the brevity of life so that we might grow in wisdom. Teach us to realize the brevity of life so that we could grow in wisdom. You know, my translation is, remind me that life is short so that I can live well. Remind me life is short so I can live well. And there's an ancient spiritual practice where the people would be encouraged to meditate regularly on their own death. And in the 6th century, I think it was Saint Benedict, he like wrote the first document for like monasteries and monks. And he had this line in it where he said, day by day, remind yourself that you're going to die. All right, one of my instructions is day by day, remind yourself that you're going to die. He's saying, don't waste your life on triviality. Remember what matters. You know, life's fleeting. It's precious. Don't waste us. Because we would think, well, certainly in the culture I live in, death is not spoken about. If you're in the pub with your mates and say, do you ever think that one day you're going to die? It's like the taboo subject, because we think talking about death or thinking about death is a depressing thing. It's a bad thing. It brings us down. So why would the ancients say, actually, you should think about it often? You should remind yourself. In fact, some would take this instruction a step further. Some monks would take a skull of someone who died in the monastery, Brother Bernard or whatever, and they would keep it in their cells. They'd have a candle and their Bible and a skull. They took it so seriously because there was this fear that we'd get wrapped up in things that don't matter, and then we get to the end of our life and we just live with regrets. And that's like monks we're talking about, who's like given their whole life to this spiritual thing. They didn't have like tech and all the distraction that we have. So it kind of feels to me it's even more important for us to be thinking about. And I don't know about you, but it feels to me like our culture is just conspiring against us, trying to just do everything it can to egg us on to just waste our lives. There was a book that came out a few years ago, and it was called Amusing Ourselves to Death. We're just literally heading down a life of amusement until we die. And there's a whole economy, companies worth billions of dollars, that are based on the simple practice of helping us to deny death through the coping mechanism of distraction. And I can prove in one instant to you that this ancient spiritual practice that sounds so depressing is actually really life-giving. I can tell you something that's just going to guarantee prove it. And this is it. Have you or anybody you know ever had a near-death experience? Or have you ever read a biography or heard a story of someone who had a near-death experience? They thought they were going to die, but then they didn't. And what happens as a result of that experience for you, for the people you know, or the things that you've read? In nearly every occasion, whenever I hear that, people's lives are changed for the better, don't they? There's a guy called Ted Leonson, and he was 25 in 1983. He was in a plane that crashed, and there was a crash landing. And as his plane is coming down to crash, he's like, he doesn't know if he's going to survive or not. But as he heads down and he's facing death in the face, he's 25-year-old. This is what he says to himself. He says to me, if I survive, I'm going to play offense for the rest of my life. If I survive this, I'm no longer going to live safely, live defensively. I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to live offensive, offense as in attacking life, living with a risk, not living with regret. And actually, he did survive it. And what he did, he thought about his life and he come up with 101 life goals. Some of them are like crazy off the scale that he wrote down. And he said, I'm going to spend the rest of my life living for something, not just getting life distracting me. And he just had this focus on taking risks and embracing failure. And some of his life goals, they were just fun stuff. He had one which was to invent a board game. Others were like really serious about impacting a major children's charity. That's what he wanted. Some were like business related, about businesses he wanted to build and how much money he wanted to make. Others were around his family, that he wanted children and he wanted grandchildren and he wanted to make certain amounts of investment and have a quality of relationship with them. But he was like, actually, one day I'm going to die, so I don't want to waste it. I don't want to live with regret. I'm going to go for it. And he had that experience that just broke him out of any sort of distraction. Most people who have near-death experiences see them as gifts that shake them up for reality. And I think those ancient monks with that skull in their room, they were onto something. They were not just thinking life is rewarded for the small number of people who have a near-death experience, who wake up and suddenly live this extraordinary life. It's available to all of us if we remind ourselves. You say this prayer from Psalm 90, verse 12. Remind me that life is short so that I live well. And whenever we get reminded, like we get our hearing aids or something like that, that can be a gift just to shake us up. To think, actually, what are you living for? Life is short, so therefore let that impact how you live. So he's two ways that I'm like trying to live this out. I mean, one way we just need to pray that and keep that in our mind. And obviously not doing this perfectly at all, but these are the two things that come to mind when I pray this prayer and think about this idea. Number one is that moving towards meaning and away from trivia, moving towards meaningful things and away from trivia. And so nothing wrong with Netflix and being on our phone and scrolling, but it's about trying to, for me, it's about limiting those things. That I don't want to get to the end of my life and say I binge watched loads of Netflix and that was the sum total of my life. And so I try to limit the number of episodes I watch on a night, sometimes try and just do other things with my wife or my kids or whatever it might. I have a losing battle with my phone, but I try to limit that, try to put it in different rooms, that sort of thing. And then in replace of that, add in other activities that just feel more meaningful to do. Spiritual activities, spending time with people, going for walks, playing games, cooking healthy food, just stuff that feels like it's adding a bit more to my life. And a number of years ago, I read a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And there's this idea of just getting us to think about stuff. Does it matter? And part of it is like we get wrapped up in things, say you're driving and you get in a bit of a road rage into it and you get home and you want to complain about the person. It's like, well, does it really matter? Or we get upset about this celebrity or this thing in the news. And it's like, in terms of my life and anything I can do about it, does it really matter? I like watching football, and when I was younger, I was really into supporting Newcastle United. I still really support them, but when I was younger, I'd get so wrapped up to it. And if they lost or if they didn't get promoted, I remember one year they didn't get promoted, and for weeks I was just a bit depressed. And it's like, it's just a football team. I probably offended some people there, but does it really matter? Do I want to give my happiness to that? Less trivia, more meaning. And the second thing that it's made me think about is less fear and more risk, to try and live a life without regrets. And the University of Michigan, they did this kind of research on people's brain activity, and they got this hat with electrodes to measure their activity in their brain, and they got them to play this betting game. And they noticed when they won or when they lost, it would trigger activity in the brain, that winning was a good thing, and they could see in the brain that losing was a bad thing. But here's what they noticed, that when they lost, the reaction in the brain was much stronger than when they won in a game, that losses loomed larger in their mind. And it's this idea we've got bias towards preventing loss. And this is probably part of our evolution, the way we were made, because if you lost in the bush, you could have lost your life. And so we need to have this like safety first mentality. But then when you have that kind of mental bias towards safety first, and then you live that in your life and you're always just avoiding risks, avoiding failure, trying to live safely. And I don't mean that if you're in like a war-torn country. I just think in every day that we're just trying to avoid anything that might be a bit risky. And that can be really harmful. And I read a really interesting book by a guy called John Izzo, and he did some research where he talked to people who were the most happiest people he could find. So he'd ask people and say, who do you know that seems to be living a really deep and happy life? And then he would go and speak to those people, and he would talk to them about their life. And his results are in this book, in fact. Yeah, and so if you are liking this channel, why don't you subscribe and like it and comment and really support me? That would really appreciate that, to be so helpful. But yeah, here is the book. And when John Izzo was doing his research, one of the things he did, he asked people about the crossroads in their life and how they made different decisions. And from this, he got these 5 secrets about that we should know before we die. And here we go. Number 2 is this idea that they leave no regrets, that the people with the deepest happiness are the people who have no regrets. And what he found is that there were people who leaned into risk and away from failure, that they didn't regret risks that didn't work out. And actually, a life of regret means risking more. That the only regrets they have is risks that they don't take, that failure is not really a problem. Why isn't that so powerful? That it's not failure that haunts people, it's the regret that they didn't try that haunts people. And so with this whole hearing aid thing that I've got, and this awareness that life's short and I want to live well, I want to take more risks. And so I'm doing this YouTube channel, put myself out there, and it's like, I don't know if it's going to go well, I don't know if anyone's going to watch, but actually I don't care if I fail, but I just don't want to live with the regret of not trying. If people laugh or I get negative comments or it just goes nowhere, at least I'm not going to live with regret. And so I wonder whether we just need to adopt this mentality that we want to be more afraid of missing opportunities than missing mistakes, that God needs people who are going to embrace risk and not want to be people who live without regrets. A couple of years ago, I got married, and my new wife, we both had houses that we sold and brought our wealth together in a way, and we could have used that to just pay down our mortgage and have more money to spend on what we want. But we just had this vision that we just wanted to invest in property, and we wanted to be people who could invest in property to generate wealth that we might then be able to use to change the world and do some crazy stuff. And it might not work, it might go wrong, but we just don't want to live with regret. We'd rather live with risk and the failure of having to try, that we're trying to do something different and significant with our lives. And I wonder where you're living a safety first mentality, and maybe this idea of remember life is short, help me to live well, that you want to just live with a bit more risk. There's something you've been meaning to do and you're just scared it might not work or whatever. It doesn't matter if it works or not. Just want to be this person that just lives without regret. And so, yeah, life is short, so take more risks. Life is short, so focus on what matters. And if you're thinking, I'd really like to live with purpose, but I just don't know what my calling is, I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to do, then you should check out this video next, because in it I'll give you 3 simple questions you can use, and you can have those questions as a way of working out what your destiny, of working out your purpose. What is it that I'm supposed to do? So yeah, go watch that one next, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.